He had heard the stories, manifestations of the Dark One's evil returning the dead to life. But nobody else in the pavilion seemed uneasy, and this woman was too real. Hesitantly, Galad reached out and touched the apparition on the cheek. The skin was warm.
"Galad," she said, "what are you doing here? How?"
She cut off as he seized her in an embrace, causing those around him on both sides to jump in surprise. She jumped too. She lived.
"How?"
I killed Volda, Galad thought immediately. Killed him for the death of my mother, who is not dead. I have done evil. No. Volda had deserved to die for the assault on Morghese. He had spoken to children, but they'd also been sure she was dead. He would sort that out later. Right now, he needed to stop embarrassing himself in front of his men. He released his stepmother, but she kept hold of his arm. She looked dazed. He had rarely seen her that way. Baron Ibarra had stood up and was watching them with a frown.
"You know Megden?"
Megden? Galad asked. She wore a simple dress and no jewelry. Was she trying to hide as a servant? Ibarra, this is Morghese Trakand, defender of the realm, protector of the people, high seat of House Trakand. She is your queen. That brought a stillness to the pavilion. Ibarra scratched at his beard thoughtfully. His wife watched Morghese with eyes wide, either shocked or angry.
"Megden," Ibarra said, "is this true?"
She lifted her chin, staring Ibarra in the eyes. How could they not see the queen in her?
"I am Morghese Trakand," she said, "but I have renounced my throne in favor of Elaine. Before the light, I will never again claim the crown."
Galad nodded. Yes. She must have feared that Ibarra would use her against Andor.
"I'm taking you back to my camp, Mother,"
Galad said, still watching Ibarra. "Then we can discuss the way you were treated by this man." She turned level eyes on Galad.
"An order, Galad? Have I no say in the matter?"
He frowned, leaning in and speaking in a whisper.
"Does he have others captive? What leverage does he have over you?"
She shook her head and replied softly,
"This man is not what you think he is, Galad. He is rough-cut, and I certainly don't like what he's doing to Andor. But he is no friend of the Shadow. I have more to fear from your associates than from Baron Ibarra."
Yes, she did have reason to distrust the children. Good reason.
"Will you come with me, my lady? I promise you that you may leave and return to Ibarra's camp at any time. Whatever you suffered from the children in the past, you will be safe now. I vow this."
Morghese gave him a nod.
"Dama Dread," Ibarra said.
"Wait a moment." Galad turned, laying his hand on his sword pommel again. Not as a threat, but a reminder. Many of those in the pavilion had begun to whisper.
"Yes?"
Galad asked.
"You wanted a judge," Ibarra said. "Would you accept your mother in that position?"
Galad didn't hesitate. Of course. She'd been a queen since her 18th name day, and he had seen her sit in judgment. She was fair. Harsh, but fair. But would the other children accept her? She'd been trained by the Aes Sedai. They'd see her as one of them. A problem. But if it gave a way out of this, perhaps he could make them see the truth.
"I would," Galad said. "And if I vouched for her, my men would as well."
"Well," Ibarra said, "I'd accept her too." Both men turned to Morghese. She stood in her simple yellow dress, looking more a queen by the moment.
"Baron," she said, "if I sit in judgment, I will not temper my decisions. You took me in when we needed shelter, and for that I am appreciative. But if I decide that you have committed murder, I will not hold back my decision."
"That will do," Ibarra said. He seemed sincere.
My Lord Captain Commander, Bayar said softly in Galad's ear, sounding fervent. I fear this would be a farce. He's not said he would submit to punishment.
No, I have not, Abara said. How had he heard those whispers? It would be meaningless. You think me a dark friend and a murderer. You wouldn't accept my word on taking punishment, not unless I was in your custody, which I won't allow.
See? Bayar said more loudly. What is the point? Galad met Abara's golden eyes again.
It will give us a trial, he said, growing more certain, and legal justification. I'm beginning to see, Child Bayar. We must prove our claims. Otherwise, we are no better than Asunawa.
But the trial will not be fair.
Galad turned to the tall soldier. Are you questioning my mother's impartiality? The gaunt man froze, then shook his head.
No, my Lord Captain Commander.
Galad turned back to Abara. I ask Queen Alejandra to grant that this trial be legally binding in her realm. If Lord Abara requests it, I will. She sounded uncomfortable. I do request it, Alejandra, Perrin said. But only if Damodred agrees to release all of my people that he's holding. Keep the supplies, but let the people go, as you promised me you would before.
Very well,
Galad said. It will happen once the trial begins. I promise it. When will we meet? Give me a few days to prepare. In 3 days, then, Galad said. We hold the trial here, in this pavilion, in this place. Bring your witnesses, Abara said. I'll be here.
Chapter 27. A Call to Stand. I am not opposed to questioning the Lord Dragon, Egwene read from the letter as she sat in her study. Indeed, the more absolute a man's power becomes, the more necessary questioning becomes. However, know that I am not a man who gives his loyalty easily, and I have given my loyalty
Hey,
to
Ben,
him,
how you doing?
not because of the throne he
Welcome.
provided me, but
I'm just
because of
rolling a
what he has
couple
done
up.
for Tyr. Yes, he grows more erratic by the day. What else are we to expect from the Dragon Reborn? He will break the world. We knew this when we gave him our allegiance, much as a sailor must sometimes give his loyalty to the captain who steers his ship straight for the rocks. When an unnavigable tempest rises behind, the rocks are the only option. Still, your words bring me concern. The destruction of the seals is not something we should undertake without careful discussion. The Lord Dragon charged me with raising him an army, and I have done so. If you provide the gateways you have promised, I will bring some troops to this meeting place along with the loyal high lords and ladies. Be warned, however, that the Shanshan presence to my west continues to weigh heavily upon my mind. The bulk of my
Oh, yeah,
armies
Ben,
must
that's
remain
good.
behind. High Lord Darlin Cisnera, King of Tyr, beneath the rule of the Dragon Reborn, Randall Thor. Egwene tapped the sheet with one finger. She
Yeah,
was
but I got
impressed.
it's
Darlin had committed his
growing
words
some
to paper, rather than sending a
roachweed.
messenger with them memorized. If a messenger fell into the wrong hands, his words
It's
could
what
always be
it's what I
denied.
got, so it
Convicting
works.
a man of treason based on the testimony of one messenger was difficult. Words on paper, however, bold. By writing them, Darlin said, I do not care if the Lord Dragon discovers what I have written. I stand by it. But leaving behind the bulk of his army? That would not do. Egwene inked her pen. King Darlin, your concern for your kingdom is well measured, as is your loyalty to the man you follow. I know that the Shanshan are a danger to Tyr, but let us not forget that the Dark One, not the Shanshan, is our primary concern
that,
during
and I
these
got
worst of days. Perhaps it is easy to think yourself safe from the Trollocs when
Gotta,
so distant from the battle lines. But how will you feel once
reclaim
the
the smoke
cushions of
too.
Andor and Kyrian have fallen? You are separated from the Shanshan by hundreds of miles.
Yeah, that's what we call it too.
Egwene
Is
paused. Carvalin had been separated from the Shanshan by hundreds of miles and had nearly been destroyed. He was right to be afraid, and he was a good king,
reclaim.
considering it. But she needed his army at the field of Merilor. Perhaps she could offer a way for him to both be safe and help with Rand. Ilion holds for now, she wrote, and gives you a buffer between the Shanshan and yourself. I will provide you with gateways and a promise. If the Shanshan move against here, I will give you gateways so you can return immediately and defend your nation. She hesitated. Chances were good that the Shanshan had traveling now. Nobody was safe from them, no matter how far or close they might be. If they decided to strike for Tyr, even giving Darlin gateways back might not be enough to help. She felt a shiver, remembering her own time with the Shanshan, captive as a Damani. She loathed them with a hatred that sometimes worried her. But Darlin's support was essential to her plans. She gritted her teeth and continued writing. The Dragon Reborn must see our full forces marshaled to oppose his brash intentions. If he sees this as half-hearted, we will never dissuade him from his course. Please come with all of your troops. She sanded the letter, then folded and sealed it. Darlin and Elaine were monarchs of two of the most powerful kingdoms. Both were very important to her plans. Next, she would respond to a letter from Gregorin den Lucianos of Ilion. She hadn't yet told him directly that she had met in Stephaneus at the White Tower, but had hinted at it. She'd also spoken to Matin himself, letting him know he was free to leave if he wished. She would not be in the habit of holding monarchs against their will. Unfortunately, Matin was now afraid for his life, should he return. He'd been gone too long, and he viewed Ilion as being in the Dragon Reborn's pocket. Which it probably was. What a mess. One problem at a time. Gregorin, the steward in Ilion, was very hesitant to support her cause. He seemed more intimidated by Rand than Darlin was, and the Shanshan were not a distant concern for him. They were practically pounding on his city gates. She wrote Gregorin a firm letter, giving a promise like the one she'd given Darlin. Perhaps she could arrange to keep Matin away, something both men might want, though she wouldn't let Gregorin know that, in exchange for him bringing his armies northward. Obliquely, she realized what she was doing. She was using Rand's proclamation as a beacon by which to gather and tie the monarchs to the White Tower. They would come to support her arguments against breaking the seals, but in the end, they would serve humankind in the last battle. A knock came at her door. She looked up as Sylviana peeked in. The woman held up a letter. It was curled tightly from having been carried in by pigeon. Your expression is grim, Egwene noted. The invasion has begun, she said. Watchtowers across the Blight's border go silent, one at a time. Waves of Trollocs advance beneath clouds that boil black. Kandor, Arafel, and Saldaea are at war. Do they hold? Egwene asked, with a spike of fear. Yes, Sylviana said, but news is uncertain and piecemeal. This letter, which is from an eyes and ears I trust, claims that an assault this massive has not been seen since the Trolloc Wars. Egwene took a deep breath. What of Tarwin's Gap? I don't know. Find out.
Got
Call
one rolled
Swan
up.
in here. She might have more. The Blue Network is the most extensive. Swan wouldn't know everything, of course, but she would have her fingers in it. Sylviana nodded curtly. She didn't say the obvious, that the Blue Network was the Blue Ajas, not to be preempted by the Amerlin. Well, the last battle was at hand. Some concessions had to be made. Sylviana closed the door softly, and Egwene picked up her pen to finish her screed to Gregorin. She was interrupted by another knock, this one much more hasty. Sylviana threw open the door a second later. Mother, she said, they're meeting, as you said they would. Egwene felt a stab of annoyance. She calmly put down her pen and stood. Let us be to it, then. She walked from her study, pace hurried. In the keeper's antechamber she passed a pair of accepted, Nicola, who had just been raised, and Nissa. She'd liked them both raised to the shawl before the last battle. They were young but powerful, and every sister would be needed, even one who, like Nicola, had proved to have terrible judgment in the past. These two had brought the news about the hall. The novices and accepted were among the most loyal to Egwene, but were often ignored by the sisters. For now they remained behind, as Egwene and Sylviana hurried toward the hall. I can't believe they would try this, Sylviana said softly as they walked.
Nice.
It's not what you think, Egwene guessed. They won't try to depose me. The division is too fresh in their minds. Then why meet without you? There are ways to move against
I'm
the
about to
Amarone
dab
without
some
deposing her.
reclaim out of
She'd
one
been
of my Dr.
expecting this for
Dabbers.
some time, but that didn't make it any less frustrating. Aes Sedai would unfortunately be Aes Sedai. It had only been a matter of time before someone decided to try wrenching power from her. They reached the hall. Egwene pushed open the doors and stepped in. Her appearance was met with cool Aes Sedai gazes. The seats weren't all filled, but 2/3 of them were. She was surprised to see 3 red sitters. What of Pavara and Javindra? It appeared that their extended absence during this time had prompted the red to action. They had been replaced by Rachin and Viria Connerall. The sisters were the only siblings in the White Tower, now that Vandine and Adelius were dead. An odd choice, but not unexpected. Both Romanda and Lelaine were in attendance. They met Egwene's gaze evenly. How strange to see them here with so many sisters who they had been at odds with. A common foe, Egwene, could heal any number of rifts. She should have been pleased at that, perhaps. Lelaine was the only blue, and there was also only one brown. Takima, who looked sick. The ivory-skinned brown wouldn't meet Egwene's gaze. There were 2 whites, 2 yellows, including Ramanda, 2 grays, and all 3 greens. Egwene gritted her teeth when she saw that. That was the Aja she would have joined, but it gave her the most grief. Egwene did not chastise them for meeting without her. She simply strode down between them, Sylviana announcing her. Egwene turned and sat down on the Amerlin seat, her back to the massive rose window. There she sat quietly. Well? Ramanda finally asked. Her gray hair up in a bun, she looked like a mother wolf sitting atop the ledge out front of her den. Are you going to say anything, Mother? You did not inform me of this meeting, Egwene said. So I assume you do not want my words. I have come merely to watch. That seemed to make them more uncomfortable. Sylviana walked to her side, brandishing one of her best
Hey, Fire,
expressions
how you
of
doing?
displeasure. All right, then, Rubinda said. I believe we were going to hear from Soraya
Getting
next.
the second one rolled
The
up.
blocky white was one of the sitters who had left the tower when Elida was raised, but she had made her share of trouble in Saladar. Egwene was not surprised to see her here. The woman stood, pointedly not looking at Egwene. I will add my testimony. During the days of uncertainty within the tower, that would mean the division, few sisters liked to speak of it outright. The Amerlin did exactly as Ramanda indicated. We were taken by surprise when she called for a declaration of war.
Got
Within the
2
law,
rolled up
there are
now.
provisions that give the Amerlin almost total power when official war is declared. By being goaded into making war with Elida, we gave the Amerlin the means to subject the hall to her will. She looked around the room, but did not turn to Egwene. It is my opinion that she will try something similar again. That must be prevented. The hall is meant to be a balance upon the Amerlin's power. She sat down. Hearing the words actually relieved Egwene. One could never be certain what kinds of scheming were happening in the White Tower. This meeting meant her plans were proceeding as hoped, and that her enemies, or, well, her reluctant allies, hadn't seen what she was really doing.
Oh yeah,
They were
Fire. How
busy
you doing?
reacting to things she'd done months ago. That didn't mean they weren't dangerous, but when a person anticipated danger, it could be handled. What can we do? Magla asked. She glanced at Egwene. To be prudent, I mean, to make certain the hall of the tower is in no way limited. We cannot declare war, Lilane said firmly. And yet, to avoid it, Verilyn said. War is declared between halves of the White Tower, but not against the Shadow? War, Takima said hesitantly, is already declared against the Shadow. Need there be an official proclamation? Is not our existence enough? Indeed, do not the oaths make our position clear? But we must make some kind of declaration, Ramonda said. She was eldest among them, and would be the one running the meeting. Something to make the position of the hall known, to dissuade the Amerlin from an imprudent call for war. Ramonda didn't seem embarrassed at all by what they had done here. She looked directly at Egwene. No, she and Lilane would not quickly forgive Egwene for choosing a red as her keeper. But how would we send such a message? Andaya asked. I mean, what are we to do? Make a pronouncement from the hall that there won't be a declaration of war? Would that not sound ridiculous? The women fell silent. Egwene found herself nodding, though not specifically to what was being said. She had been raised through unconventional circumstances. Left alone, the hall would try to establish its power as greater than hers. This day could easily have meant a step toward that. The Amerlin seat's strength had not been constant through the centuries. One could rule almost totally, while another was controlled by the sitters. I believe the hall acts in wisdom, Egwene said, speaking very carefully. The sitters turned to her. Some looked relieved. Those who were more familiar with her, however, looked suspicious. Well, that was good. Better they regard her as a threat than as a child to be bullied. She hoped they would eventually respect her as their leader, but there was only so much she could do with the time given. The war between factions within the tower was a different type of battle, Egwene continued. It was deeply and individually my battle as Amerlin, for that division was initially about the Amerlin seat. But the war against the Shadow is more vast than any one person. It is greater than you or I, greater than the White Tower. It is the war of all life and creation, from the most destitute of beggars to the most lavish of queens. The sitters considered that in silence. Ramonda spoke first. And so you would not oppose the hall taking over prosecution of the war, managing General Bryn's armies and the Tower Guard? That depends, Egwene said, upon how the provision was worded. There was movement in the hallway outside, and Saerin bustled into the hall, accompanied by Janya Frende. They shot Takima withering glances, and she shrank down like a threatened bird. Saerin and Egwene's other supporters would have been informed of this meeting just after Egwene herself was. Ramonda cleared her throat. Perhaps we should see if there is anything in the law of war that can help. I'm certain you have studied it quite thoroughly now, Ramonda, Egwene said. What is it you propose? There is a provision for the hall taking up prosecution of a war, Ramonda said. That requires the Amerlin's assent, Egwene said idly. If that was Ramonda's game, then how had she intended to get Egwene's approval after meeting without her? Perhaps she'd had a different plan. Yes, it would require the Amerlin's agreement, said Rachin. She was a tall, dark-haired woman, and liked to wear her hair in a coil of braids atop her head. But you said that you thought it wise to take this measure. Well, Egwene said, trying to sound as if she were being pressed into a corner, Agreeing with the Hall is quite different from allowing a provision to ban me from the day-to-day workings of the army. What is the Amelin seek to do, if not see to the war? By reports, you've been dedicating yourself to wrangling kings and queens, Lilane said. That seems a fine task for the Amerlin. Then you'll stand for such a provision? Egwene said. The Hall sees to the army while I am given authority for dealing with the monarchs of the world? Lilane said. Yes, I'd stand for that. I suppose I could agree, Egwene said. Shall we put it to a vote? Ramonda said quickly, as if pouncing on the moment. Very well, Egwene said. Who will stand for this motion? Rubinda rose to her feet and was joined by Faisella and Farna, the other Greens. Rachin and her sister stood quickly, though Barasine was watching Egwene with eyes narrowed. Magla stood next, and Ramonda reluctantly joined her. Farana rose slowly. Lilane was next. She and Ramonda shot daggered glances at one another. That was 9. Egwene's heart beat quickly as she glanced at Takima. The woman seemed very disturbed, as if trying to sort through Egwene's plan. The same went for Soroya. The calculating white studied Egwene, tugging her ear. Suddenly her eyes went wide, and she opened her mouth to speak. At that moment, Doacine and Yukiri arrived, striding into the room. Saerin stood immediately. Slim Doacine glanced at the women around her. What motion are we standing for? An important one, Saerin said. Well, I suppose I'll stand for it then. As will I, Yukiri said. The lesser consensus is given, it seems, Saerin said. The Hall is given authority over the White Tower's army, while the Amerlin is given authority and responsibility for dealing with the world's monarchs. No, Soroya said, climbing to her feet. Don't you see? He is a king. He holds the laurel crown. You've just given the Amerlin sole responsibility for dealing with the Dragon Reborn. There was silence in the hall. Well, Ramonda said. Surely She trailed off as she turned, seeing Egwene's serene face. I suppose someone should ask for the greater consensus, Saerin said dryly. But you've managed to handle this quite efficiently with the lesser rope already. Egwene stood. I meant what I said about the Hall's choices being wise, and nobody has hanged herself. It is wise of the Hall to put me in charge of dealing with the Dragon Reborn. He will need a firm, familiar hand. You are also wise to see that the details of managing the army were demanding too much of my attention. You will want to choose someone among you to go through and approve all of General Bryn's supply requests and recruitment schemes. I assure you there are a multitude of them. I am pleased that you have seen the need to aid the Amerlin. I am deeply displeased at the secretive nature of this meeting. Do not try to deny that it was done in secret, Ramonda. I see you preparing to object. If you wish to speak, know that I will pin you by the 3 oaths into answering directly. The yellow bit off her comment. How can you not have learned the foolishness of acts like this? Egwene said. Is your memory so short? She looked at the women in turn and was satisfied by the number who winced. It is time, Egwene said, for a change to be made. I propose that there be no further meetings of this nature. I propose that it be written into Tower law that if any sitter leaves the White Tower, her Ajah must appoint a surrogate to vote for her while absent.
It's
I
reclaim,
propose that
but
it be
it does
written
its
into
job.
Tower law that no meeting of the Hall can be convened unless every sitter or her surrogate either is present or has sent word directly that she cannot attend. I propose that the Amerlin must be informed and given a reasonable amount of time to attend if she wishes, of every meeting of the Hall, save when she cannot be found or is indisposed in some way. Bold changes, Mother, Saren said. You propose altering traditions that have been established for centuries. Traditions that hitherto have been used only for treachery, backbiting, and division, Egwene said. It is time for this hole to be closed, Saren. The last time it was used effectively, the Black Aja manipulated us into casting down an Amerlin, raising a fool in her place, and dividing the tower. Are you aware that Kandor, Saldea, and Arafel are swarming with shadow spawn? Several of the sisters gasped. Others nodded, including Lelaine. So the Blue Network was still reliable. Good. The last battle is here, Egwene said. I will not withdraw my proposal. Either you will stand now, or you will be known through all time as one of those who refused. At the dusk of an age, can you not stand for openness and light? Will you not, for all of our sakes, make it impossible for a meeting of the Hall to be called without your presence? To leave any out means the possibility that you will be left out. The women were silent. One by one, those who were standing sat back down to prepare for the new vote. Who will stand for this motion? Egwene asked. They stood. Blessedly, they stood. One at a time, slowly, reluctantly, but they did it. Every one of them. Egwene let out a deep breath. They might squabble and scheme, but they knew right when they saw it. They shared the same goals. If they disagreed, it was because they had different views on how to reach those goals. Sometimes it was hard to remember that. Looking shaken by what they'd done, the sitters allowed the meeting to break up. Outside, sisters had begun to gather, surprised to find the hall meeting. Egwene nodded to Saren and the others of her supporters and walked from the room, Sylviana at her side. That was a victory, the keeper said once they were alone. She sounded satisfied. But you did still give up control of our armies. I had to, Egwene said. They could have pulled command away from me at any time. This way I got something in return. Authority over the Dragon Reborn? Yes, Egwene said. But I was referring more to closing that loophole in Tower law. So long as it was possible for the Hall to meet in relative secret, my authority, the authority of any Amerlin, could be circumvented. Now, if they want to maneuver, they'll have to do it in front of my face. Sylviana gave a rare smile. I suspect that since something like today is the result of such maneuvering, Mother, they will be more hesitant in the future. That's the idea, Egwene said. Though I doubt Aes Sedai will ever stop trying to maneuver. They simply cannot be allowed to dice with the last battle or the Dragon Reborn. Back at Egwene's study, Nicola and Nissa still waited. You did well, Egwene told them. Very well. In fact, I'm of a mind to give you more responsibility. Go to the traveling ground and go to Camelin. The Queen there will be expecting you. Return with the items she gives you. Yes, Mother, Nicola said, grinning. What will she give us? Terangrial, Egwene said. Used for visiting the world of dreams. I'm going to begin training you and some others in their use. Do not use them without my express permission, however. I will send some soldiers to go with you. That should be enough to keep the two in line. The two accepted, curtsied, and trotted away, excited. Sylviana looked at Egwene. You didn't swear them to silence. They are accepted, and they will brag about being trained with the Terangrial. I'm depending on it, Egwene said, walking to the study door. Sylviana raised an eyebrow. I don't intend to let the girls come to harm, Egwene said. In fact, they'll be doing a lot less in Tel'aran'rhiod than they probably suspect from what I just said. Rosil has been lenient with me so far, but she'll never let me put Accepted in danger. This is just to start the proper rumors. What rumors? Gawain scared off the assassin. Egwene said. There hasn't been a murder in days, and I suppose we should bless him for that. But the killer is still hiding, and I've glimpsed Black Sisters watching me until I run Riad. If I can't catch them here, then I will catch them there. But first I need a way to trick them into thinking they know where to find us. So long as you intend them to find you, and not those girls, Sylviana said, voice calm, but iron. She had been the mistress of novices. Egwene found herself grimacing, thinking of the things that had been expected of her as an accepted. Yes, Sylviana was right. She would have to take care not to subject Nicola and Nissa to similar dangers. She had survived and was stronger for it, but accepted should not be put through such trials unless there was no other choice. I will take care, Egwene said. I simply need them to spread the rumor that I have a very important meeting coming up. If I lay the groundwork properly, our phantom won't be able to resist coming in to listen. Oh, essential, Egwene said. She hesitated, hand on her door. Speaking of Gawain, have you found out where in the city he's run off to? Actually, Mother, I had a note on this earlier today. It appears that, well, he isn't in the city. One of the sisters delivering your messages to the Queen of Andor returned with news of seeing him there. Egwene groaned, closing her eyes. That man will be the death of me. Tell him to return. Infuriating though he is, I'm going to need him in the coming days. Yes, Mother, Sylviana said, taking out a sheet of paper. Egwene entered her study to continue her letters. Time was short. Time was so very, very short. Chapter 28. Oddities. What are you planning, husband? Fail asked. They were back in their tent, following the parley with the white cloaks. Perrin's actions had surprised her, which was invigorating, yet also disturbing. He took off his coat. I smell a strangeness on the wind, Fail. Something I've never smelled before. He hesitated, glancing at her. There are no wolves. No wolves? I can't sense any nearby, Perrin said, eyes distant. There were some before. Now they're gone. You said that they don't like being close to people. He pulled off his shirt, exposing a muscled chest covered in curling brown hair. There were too few birds today, too few creatures in the underbrush. Might burn that sky. Is that causing this, or is it something else? He sighed, sitting down on their sleeping pallet. You're going to go there? Fail asked. Something's wrong, he repeated. I need to learn what I can before the trial. There might be answers in the wolf dream. The trial. Perrin, I don't like this idea. You're angry about Megden. Of course I'm angry about Megden, she said. They'd been through Malden together and she hadn't told Fail that she was the Queen of Bloody Andor? It made Fail look like a fool, like a small-town braggart, extolling her skill with the sword in front of a passing blade master. She didn't know if she could trust us, Perrin said. She was fleeing one of the Forsaken, it seems. I'd have hidden myself, too. Fail glared at him. Don't look at me like that, he said. She didn't do it to make you look bad, Fail. She had her reasons. Let it go. That made her feel a little better. It was so nice that he would stand up for himself now. Well, it makes me wonder who Lini will turn out to be. Some Shanshan queen? Master Gil? The king of Arad-Doman in hiding? Perrin smiled. I suspect they're her attendants. Gil is who he says he is, at least. Balwer is probably having a fit for not having figured this out. I bet he did figure it out, Fael said, kneeling beside him. Perrin, I meant what I said about this trial. I'm worried. I won't let myself be taken, he said. I only said I'd sit through a trial and give them a chance to present evidence. Then what's the point? Fail said. It gives me more time to think, he said, and it might stop me from having to kill them. Their captain, Damodred. Something about him smells better than many of the rest. Not rabid with anger or hate. This will get our people back and let me plead my side. It feels good for a man to be able to have his say. Maybe that's what I've needed all this time. Well, all right, Fael said. But in the future, please consider warning me of your plans. I will, he said, yawning and lying back. In truth, it didn't occur to me until the last moment. Fael kept her tongue with some difficulty. At least something good had come from that parley. She'd watched Berelaine when she'd met Damodred, and she'd rarely seen a woman's eyes light up so brightly. Fael might be able to make use of that. She looked down. Perrin was already snoring softly.
Perrin found himself sitting with his back against something hard and smooth. The too dark, almost evil sky of the wolf dream boiled above the forest, which was a mixture of fir, oak, and leatherleaf. He stood up, then turned and looked at what he had been leaning against. A massive steel tower stretched toward the turbulent heavens. Too straight, with walls that looked like a single piece of seamless metal, the tower exuded a completely unnatural feel. I told you this place was evil, Hopper sent, suddenly sitting next to Perrin. Foolish cub. I didn't come here by choice, Perrin protested. I woke here. Your mind is focused on it, Hopper said, or the mind of one to whom you are connected. Matt, Perrin said, without understanding how he knew. The colors didn't appear. They never did in the wolf dream. As foolish a cub as yourself? Maybe more foolish. Hopper smelled incredulous, as if unwilling to believe that was possible. Come, the wolf sent. It has returned. What has? Hopper vanished. Perrin followed with a frown. He now could easily catch the scent of where Hopper had gone. They appeared on the Johanna Road, and that strange violet glass wall was there again, slicing the roadway in half, extending high in the air and into the distance in either direction. Perrin walked up to a tree. Its bare branches seemed trapped in the glass, immobile. Hopper paced nearby. We have seen this thing before, he said. Long, long ago. So many lives ago. What is it? A thing of men? Hopper's sending included confused images. Flying, glowing discs, impossibly tall structures of steel. Things from the Age of Legends? Hopper didn't understand their use any more than he understood the use of a horse cart or a candle.
There's
Perrin
numbers
looked down the roadway. He didn't recognize this section of Gildon.
etched on the
It must be
lenses.
farther toward Lugard. The wall had appeared in a different place than it had last time. A thought occurring to him, Perrin moved down the roadway in a few jumping bursts. 100 paces away, he looked back and confirmed his suspicions. That glass didn't make a wall, but an enormous dome. Translucent, with a violet tint, it seemed to extend for leagues. Hopper moved at a blur, coming to stand beside him. We must go. He's in there, isn't he? Perrin asked. He reached out. Oak Dancer, Sparks, and Boundless were near. Ahead, inside the dome. They responded with quick, frantic sendings at hunt and being hunted. Why don't they flee? Perrin asked. Hopper sent confusion. I'm going to them, Perrin said, willing himself forward. Nothing happened. Perrin felt a stab of panic in his gut. What was wrong? He tried again, this time trying to send himself to the base of the dome. It worked. He arrived in an eye blink, that glass-like surface rising in a cliff face before him. It's this dome, he thought. It's blocking me. Suddenly he understood the trapped feeling the wolves had sent. They couldn't get away. Was that the purpose of this dome, then? To trap wolves so that Slayer could kill them? Aaron growled, stepping up to the surface of the dome. He couldn't pass in by imagining himself there, but perhaps he could get through by more mundane means. He raised a hand, then hesitated. He didn't know what touching the surface would do. The wolves sent images of a man in black and leather, with a harsh, blind face and a smile curling on his lips as he launched arrows. He smelled wrong, so wrong. He also smelled of dead wolves. Perrin couldn't leave them in there, no more than he could leave Master Gill and the others to the White Cloaks. Furious at Slayer, he touched the surface of the dome. His muscles suddenly lost strength. They felt like water, his legs unable to hold him up. He fell to the ground, hard. His foot was still touching the dome, passing through it. The dome appeared to have no substance. His lungs no longer worked. Inflating his chest was too difficult. Panicked, he imagined himself elsewhere, but it didn't work. He was trapped, as surely as the wolves. A gray-silver blur appeared next to him. Jaws grabbed his shoulder. As Hopper pulled him free of the violet dome, Perrin immediately felt his strength return. He gasped for breath. "Foolish cub," Hopper said. "You'd leave them?" Perrin said, voice ragged. "Not foolish to dig in the hole. Foolish for not waiting for me in case hornets came out." Hopper turned toward the dome. "Help me if I fall." He padded forward, then touched his nose to the dome. Hopper stumbled but righted himself and continued on slowly. On the other side, he collapsed, but his chest continued to move. "How did you do it?" Perrin asked, rising. "I am me." Hopper, as he saw himself, which was identical to who he was. Also sense of strength and stability. The trick, it seemed, was to be in complete control of who you were. Like many things in the wolf dream, the strength of one's mental image was more powerful than the substance of the world itself. "Come," Hopper said. "Be strong. Pass through." "I have a better idea," Perrin said, standing up. He charged forward at full speed. He hit the violet dome and immediately went limp, but his momentum carried him to the other side, where he rolled to a stop. He groaned, shoulder hurt, arm scraped. "Foolish cub," Hopper said. "You must learn." "Now isn't the time," Perrin said, climbing to his feet. "We have to help the others." Arrows in the wind, thick, black, deadly. The hunter's laughter, the scent of a man who was stale. The killer was here. Hopper and Perrin ran down the road, and Perrin found that he could increase his speed within the dome. Tentatively, he tried jumping forward with a thought, and it worked. But when he tried to send himself outside, nothing happened. So the dome was a barrier. Within it, he could move freely,
right back.
but he could not move to a place outside it by imagining himself elsewhere. He had to pass the dome's wall physically if he wanted out. Oak Dancer, Boundless, and Sparks were ahead. And Slayer, too. Perrin growled. Frantic sendings flooded him. Dark woods. Slayer. He seemed so tall to the wolves. A dark monster with a face chiseled as if from rock. Blood on the grass. Pain, anger, terror, confusion. Sparks was wounded. The other two jumped back and forth, taunting and distracting Slayer, while Sparks crawled toward the border of the dome. "Care, young bull," Hopper sent. "This man hunts well. He moves almost like a wolf, though he is something wrong." "I'll distract him. You get Sparks." "You have arms. You carry." There was more to the sending than that, of course. Hopper's age and experience, Perrin still a pup. Perrin gritted his teeth but didn't argue. Hopper was more experienced than he was. They parted, Perrin reaching out for Sparks, finding where he was, hidden within a patch of trees, and taking himself directly there. The dark brown wolf had an arrow in his thigh, and he was whimpering softly, trailing blood as he crawled. Perrin knelt quickly and pulled the arrow out. The wolf continued to whimper, smelling frightened. Perrin held the arrow up. It smelled evil. Disgusted, he tossed it aside and picked up the wolf. Something crackled nearby, and Perrin spun. Boundless leaped between two trees, smelling anxious. The other two wolves were leading Slayer away. Perrin turned and ran toward the dome's nearest edge, carrying Sparks. He couldn't leap directly to the edge of the dome because he didn't know where it was. He burst from the trees, heart thumping. The wolf in his arms seemed to grow stronger as they left the arrow behind. Perrin ran more quickly, using a speed that felt reckless, moving hundreds of paces with blurring speed. The dome wall approached, and he pulled to a stop. Slayer was suddenly there, standing before him, bow drawn. He wore a black cloak that billowed around him, his bow a wicked thing with a dark string. He was no longer smiling, and his eyes were thunderous. He released. Perrin shifted and never saw where the arrow landed. He appeared in the place where he'd first entered the dome. He should have gone there first. He hurled himself through the violet dome, collapsing on the other side, sending Sparks tumbling. The wolf yelped. Perrin hit hard. "Young bull!" Sparks sent an image of Slayer, dark like a thunderhead, standing right inside the barrier with bow drawn. Perrin didn't look. He shifted, sending himself to the slopes of Dragonmount. Once there, he leaped to his feet, anxious, hammer appearing in his hand. Groups of nearby wolves sent greeting. Perrin ignored them for the moment. Slayer did not follow. After a few tense moments, Hopper appeared. "Did the others get away?" Perrin asked. "They are free," he said. "Whisperer is dead." The sending showed the wolf, from the viewpoint of the others in the pack, being killed moments after the dome appeared. Sparks had taken an arrow as he nuzzled at her side in panic. Perrin growled. He nearly jumped away to confront Slayer again, but a caution from Hopper stopped him. "Too soon. You must learn." "It's not only him," Perrin said. "I need to look at the area around my camp and that of the White Cloaks. Something smells wrong there in the waking world. I need to see if something is odd there." "Odd?" Hopper sent the image of the dome. "It is probably related." The two oddities seemed likely to be more than mere coincidence. "Search another time. Slayer is too strong for you." Perrin took a deep breath. "I have to face him eventually, Hopper. Not now." "No," Perrin agreed. "Not now. Now we practice."
Light the second one here in
He
just a
turned to
sec.
the wolf. "As we will do every night, until I am ready." Rodoliteralda rolled over in his cot, neck slick with sweat. Had Saldaea always been this hot and muggy? He wished for home, the cool ocean breezes of Bandar Eben. Things felt wrong. Why hadn't the Shadow Spawn attacked? 100 possibilities rattled in his mind. Were they waiting for new siege engines? Were they scouting out forests in order to build them? Or were their commanders content with a siege? The entire city was surrounded, but there had to be enough Trollocs out there to overwhelm it now. They had taken to beating drums, all hours. Thump, thump, thump. Steady, like the heartbeat of an enormous animal, the great serpent itself, coiling itself around the city. Dawn was beginning to shine outside. He hadn't turned in until well after midnight. Durham, who commanded the morning watch, had ordered that Ituralda not be disturbed until noon. His tent was in a shadowed alcove of the courtyard. He had wanted to be close to the wall, and had refused a bed. That had been foolish. Though a cot had been fine for him in previous years, he wasn't as young as he'd once been. Tomorrow he'd move. Now, he told himself, sleep. It wasn't that easy. The accusation that he was dragon-sworn left him unsettled. In Aradaman, he'd been fighting for his king, someone he'd believed in. Now he was fighting in a foreign land for a man he'd met only once, all because of a gut feeling. Light, but it was hot. Sweat ran down his cheeks, making his neck itch. It shouldn't be this hot so early in the morning. It wasn't natural. Those burning drums, still pounding. He sighed, climbed off his sweat-dampened cot. His leg ached. It had for days now. You're an old man, Rodel, he thought, stripping off his sweaty small clothes and getting out some freshly washed ones. He stuffed his trousers into knee-high riding boots. A simple white shirt with black buttons went on next, and then his gray coat, buttoning straight up to the collar. He was strapping on his sword when he heard hurried footsteps outside, followed by whispers. That conversation grew heated, and he stepped outside just as someone said, "Lord Ituralde will wish to know." "Know what?" Ituralde asked. A messenger boy was arguing with his guards. All three turned toward him sheepishly. "I'm sorry, my lord," Connell said. "We were instructed to let you sleep." "A man who can sleep in this heat must be half lizard, Connell," Ituralde said. "Lad, what's the word?" "Captain Yurley is on the wall, sir," the youth said. Ituralde recognized the young man. He'd been with him from near the beginning of this campaign. "He said you should come." Ituralde nodded. He laid a hand on Connell's arm. "Thank you for watching me, old friend, but these bones aren't so frail as you think." Connell nodded, blushing. The guard fell into place behind as Ituralde crossed the courtyard. The sun had risen. Many of his troops were up. Too many. He wasn't the only one having difficulty sleeping. Atop the wall, he was greeted by a disheartening sight. On the dying land, thousands upon thousands of Trollocs camped, burning fires. Ituralde didn't like to think about where the wood for those fires came from. Hopefully, all of the nearby homesteaders and villagers had heeded the call to evacuate. Yurley stood gripping the crenellated stone of the wall next to a man in a black coat. Deep Badar was senior among the Ashaman whom Althor had given him, one of only 3 who wore both the dragon and the sword pins on his collar. The Andoran man had a flat face and black hair that he wore long. Ituralde had sometimes heard some of the black-coated men mumbling to themselves, but not Deep. He seemed fully in control. Yurley kept glancing at the Ashaman. Ituralde didn't feel comfortable with men who could channel either, but they were an excellent tool, and they hadn't failed him. He preferred to let experience instead of rumor rule him. "Lord Ituralde," Deep said. The Ashaman never saluted Ituralde, just Althor. "What is it?" Ituralde asked, scanning the hordes of Trollocs. They didn't seem to have changed since he'd bedded down. "Your man claims to be able to feel something," Yurley said. "Out there." "They have channelers, Lord Ituralde," Deep said. "I suspect at least 6, perhaps more. Men, since I can feel the power they're wielding, doing something powerful. If I squint at the far camps, I think I can sometimes see weaves, but it may be my imagination." Ituralde cursed. "That's what they've been waiting for." "What?" Yurley asked. "With Ashaman of their own." "They are not Ashaman," Deep said fervently. "All right then. With channelers of their own, they can tear this wall down as easily as knocking over a pile of blocks, Yurley. That sea of Trollocs will surge in and fill your streets." "Not so long as I stand," Deep said. "I like determination in a soldier, Deep," Ituralde said. "But you look as exhausted as I feel." Deep shot him a
Do a
glare.
dab before we light
His eyes were red from
number
lack of sleep,
second one up.
and he clenched his teeth, the muscles in his neck and face tense. He met Ituralda's eyes, then took a long, forced breath. "You are correct," Deep said, "but neither of us can do anything about that." He raised his hand, doing something that Ituralda couldn't see. A flash of red light appeared over his hand, the signal he used to draw the others to him. "Prepare your men, General, Captain. It will not be long. We cannot continue to hold that kind of power without consequences." Yearly nodded, then hurried away. Ituralda took Deep's arm, drawing his attention. "You Ashaman are too important a resource to lose," Ituralda said. "The dragon sent us here to help, not to die. If this city falls, I want you to take the others and whatever wounded you can and get out. Do you understand, soldier? Many of my men will not like this. But you know it is for the best," Ituralda said. "Don't you?" Deep hesitated. "Yes, you are correct. As you spoke now, I will get them out." He spoke in a lower voice. "This is a hopeless resistance, my lord. Whatever is happening out there, it will be deadly. It galls me to suggest it, but what you have said about my Ashaman applies to your soldiers as well. Let us flee." He said the word flee with bitterness. "The Saldeans wouldn't leave with us." "I know." Ituralda considered it. Finally, he shook his head. "Every day we delay up here keeps these monsters away from my homeland a day longer. No, I cannot go deep. This is still the best place to fight. You've seen how fortified those buildings are. We can hold inside for a few days, split apart, keep the army busy. Then my Ashaman could stay and help. You have your orders, son. You follow them. Understand?" Deep snapped his jaw shut, then nodded curtly. "I will take..." Ituralda didn't hear the rest. An explosion hit. He didn't feel it arrive. He was standing with Deep one moment, then found himself on the floor of the wall walk, the world strangely silent around him. His head screamed with pain, and he coughed, raising a trembling hand to find his face bleeding. There was something in his right eye. It seared with pain when he blinked. Why was everything so quiet? He rolled over, coughing again, right eye squeezed shut, the other watering. The wall ended a few inches away from him. He gasped. An enormous chunk of the northern wall was simply gone. He groaned, looking back in the other direction. Deep had been standing beside him. He found the Ashaman lying on the wall walk nearby, head bleeding. His right leg ended in a ragged rip of flesh and broken bone above where the knee should have been. Ituralda cursed and stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside the man. Blood was pooling beneath Deep, but he was still twitching, alive. "I need to sound the alarm." Alarm? That explosion would have been alarm enough. Inside the wall, buildings were demolished, crushed by stones flying in a spray away from the hole. Outside, Trollocs were loping forward, carrying rafts to cross the moat. Ituralda pulled the Ashaman's belt off and used it to bind his thigh. It was all he could think to do. His head was still throbbing from the explosion. The city is lost. Light, it's lost, just like that. Hands were helping him up. Dazedly, he glanced about. Connell. He'd survived the blast, though his coat was torn to shreds. He pulled Ituralda away while a pair of soldiers took Deep. The next minutes were a blur. Ituralda stumbled down the stairs from the wall, nearly pitching headfirst 15 feet onto the cobbles. Only Connell's hands kept him from falling. And then, a tent? A large open-sided tent? Ituralda blinked. A battlefield should not be so quiet. Icy coldness washed over him. He screamed. Sounds assaulted his ears and mind. Screams, rock breaking, trumpets sounding, drums throbbing. Men dying. It all hit him at once, as if plugs had been yanked from his ears. He shook himself, gasping. He was in the sick tent. Antel, the quiet, thin-haired Ashaman, stood above him. Light, but Ituralde felt exhausted. Too little sleep mixed with the strain of being healed. As the sounds of battle consumed him, he found his eyelids treacherously heavy. Lord Ituralde, Antel said, I have a weave that will not make you well, but it will make you think you are well. It could be harmful to you. Do you want me to proceed? Ituralde said. The word came out as a mumble. It's blood and bloody ashes, Antel muttered. He reached forward. Another wave of power washed through Ituralde. It was like a broom sweeping through him, pushing away all of the fatigue and confusion, restoring his senses and making him feel as if he'd had a perfect night's rest. His right eye didn't hurt anymore.
I'll be right back.
There was something lingering deep
And then we'll
down,
do a dab.
an exhaustion in his bones. He could ignore that. He sat up, breathed in and out, then looked to Antel. Now that is a useful weave, son. You should have told me you could do this. It's dangerous, Antel repeated. More dangerous than the women's version, I'm told. In some ways, more effective. You're trading alertness now for a more profound exhaustion later on. Later on, we won't be in the middle of a city that is falling to the Trollocs. Like willing, at least. Deep? I saw to him first, Antel said, gesturing to the Ashaman lying on a nearby cot, his clothing singed and his face bloodied. His right leg ended in a healed stump, and he appeared to be breathing, though unconscious. Colonel, Ituralde said. My lord, the soldier said, stepping up. He'd found a squad of soldiers to act as a personal guard. Let's investigate this mess, Ituralde said. He ran out of the sick tent toward Koromora Palace. The city was in chaos. Groups of Saldeans and Domani rushing this way and that. Connell, showing foresight, sent a messenger to find Yurli. The palace stood nearby, just before the front gate. Its wall had been damaged in the blast, but the building still looked hale. Ituralde had been using it as a command post. Men would expect to find him here. They ran inside, Connell carrying Ituralde's sword. The belt had been cut free at some point. They climbed to the third floor, then ran out onto a balcony that surveyed the area broken by the blast. As he'd originally feared, the city was lost. The swath of broken wall was being defended by a hastily assembled coalition of defenders. A mounting tide of Trollocs were throwing down rafts on the moat, some beginning to surge forward, followed by fades. Men ran through the streets, disoriented. If he'd had more time to prepare, he could have held, as he'd told Deep. Not now. Light, but this defense has been one disaster after another. Get the Ashaman, Ituralde ordered, and any of my officers you can find. We will organize the men into a retreat through gateways. Yes, my lord, Connell said. Ituralde, no! Yurli burst out onto the balcony, uniform dirtied and ripped. You survived, Ituralde said, relieved. Excellent. Man, your city is lost. I'm sorry. Bring your men with us and we can... Look, Yurli said, pulling Ituralde to the side of the balcony, pointing to the east. A thick column of smoke rose in the distance. A village the Trollocs had been. The watchfire, Yurli continued. My sister has seen aid coming. We must stand until they arrive. Ituralde hesitated. Yurli, he said softly. If a force is coming, it can't be large enough to stop this horde of Trollocs. And that's assuming it's not a ruse. The Shadowspawn have proven clever in the past. Give us a few hours, Yurli said. Hold the city with me and send scouts through those gateways of yours to see if a force really is coming. A few hours? Ituralde said. With a hole in your wall? We're overwhelmed, Yurli. Please, Yurli pled. Are you not one of those they name Great Captain? Show me what that title means, Lord Brodel Ituralde. Ituralde turned, back at the broken wall. Behind him, in the palace's top room, he could hear his officers gathering. The line at the wall was fragmenting. It wouldn't be long now. Show me what that means. Perhaps.
Timothy, are you here?
Ituraldo bellowed. A red-haired man in a black coat stepped onto the balcony. He'd be in command of the Ashaman now that Deep had fallen.
Here, Lord Ituraldo. Gather your men,
Ituraldo said urgently.
take command of that gap and have the soldiers there retreat. I want the Ashaman to hold the breach. I need a half hour. I want all of your energy, everything you've got, to hit those Trollocs. You hear me? Everything you've got. If you can channel enough to light a candle when this is done, I'll have your hides.
Sir, the Ashaman said.
Our retreat? Leave Antail in the healing tent,
Ituraldo said.
He can make a large enough gateway for the Ashaman to run. But everyone else, hold that breach.
Timothy dashed away.
Yuri,
Ituraldo said.
Your job is to gather your forces and stop them from running through the city like...
He paused. He'd been about to say, like it's Tarman Bloody Gaiden.
Burn me. Like there is nobody in command. If we are going to hold, we will need to be organized and disciplined. I need 4 cavalry companies formed up in the courtyard in 10 minutes. Give the orders.
Yes, my lord, Yuri said, moving to command so.
Oh,
Ituraldo said, turning.
I'm going to need a couple of cartloads of firewood, as many barrels of oil as you can come up with, and all of the wounded in either army who can still run, but who have face or arm wounds. Also get me anyone in the city who's ever held a bow. Go!
Nearly an hour later, Ituraldo stood, hands clasped behind his back, waiting. He'd moved in from the balcony to look out a window, as to not expose himself. But he still had a good view of the fighting. Outside the palace, the Ashaman line was finally weakening. They'd given him the better part of an hour, blasting back wave after wave of Trollocs in an awesome display of power. Blessedly, the enemy channelers had not appeared. After that show of power, hopefully they were drained and exhausted. It felt like dusk, with those oppressive clouds overhead and the masses of figures darkening the hillsides beyond the city. The Trollocs, fortunately, didn't bring ladders or siege towers. Only wave after wave at that breach, whipped into attack by the Murdral. Already, some of the black-coated men were limping away from the breach, looking exhausted. The last few threw a final blast of fire interrupting Earth, then followed their companions. They left the gap completely open and undefended, as ordered. Come on, Ituraldo thought as the smoke cleared. The Trollocs peered through the smoke, climbing over the carcasses of those the Ashaman had killed. The shadow spawn loped on hooves or thick paws. Some sniffed the air. The streets inside the gap were filled with carefully placed men who were bloodied and wounded. They began to scream as the Trollocs entered, running as commanded. Likely none of their fear was feigned. The scene looked more terrible now that many of the nearby buildings were smoldering, as if from the blast. Roofs on fire, smoke pouring from windows. The Trollocs would know that the slate roofs had been designed not to burn, and laws kept buildings from containing too much wood. Ituraldo held his breath. The Trollocs broke, running into the city, howling and roaring. Groups breaking apart as they saw the opportunity to pillage and slaughter. The door behind Ituraldo slammed open and Yuri hastened in.
The last ranks are placed. Is it working?
Ituraldo didn't answer. The proof was below. The Trollocs assumed their battle won. The blasting power of the Ashaman had the air of one final stand, and the city appeared to be in chaos. The Trollocs all ran down the streets with obvious glee. Even the Murdral who entered appeared at ease. The Trollocs avoided the burning buildings and the palace, which was walled. They moved deeper into the city, pursuing the fleeing soldiers down a wide avenue on the eastern side of the city. Carefully piled rubble encouraged the bulk of them down this avenue.
Do you have aspirations of being a general, Captain Yuri?
Ituraldo asked softly.
My aspirations are not important, Yuri said. But a man would be a fool not to hope to learn.
Then pay attention to this lesson, son. Below, shutters on windows were flung open on buildings along the avenue the Trollocs had taken. Bowmen surged out onto balconies.
If you ever have so much as an impression that you're doing what your enemy expects you to do,
Then do something else. The arrows fell and Trollocs died. Large crossbows that shot quarrels almost the size of spears targeted the Fades, and many could be seen lurching across the pavement, not knowing that they were already dead as scores of Trollocs linked to them fell. Confused, enraged, the still living creatures began to bellow and pound in the doors of the buildings filled with archers. But as they did so, the thunder began. Hoofbeats. Yurli's best cavalry charged down the streets, lances forward. They trampled the Trollocs, slaughtering them. The city became an enormous ambush. A man couldn't ask for better vantages than those buildings, and the streets were wide enough to allow a charge by those who knew the layout. The Trollocs went from bellowing in joy to screaming in pain, and scrambled over one another in their haste to get away. They entered the courtyard by the broken wall. The Saldean horsemen followed, their hooves and flanks wet with the noxious blood of the fallen. Men appeared at windows of
About to load
burning
it down with
buildings,
some
the fires
reclaim.
carefully created in sectioned-off rooms, and began loosing arrows down into the large courtyard. Others tossed new lances to the horsemen, who, re-equipped, lined up and rode into the Trollocs. The arrows stopped falling, and the cavalry made a sweeping charge across the courtyard. Hundreds of Trollocs died, perhaps thousands. Those that didn't die scrambled out of the gap. Most of the Murdrol fled. Those that did not were targets for the archers. Killing one of them could kill dozens of Trollocs linked to them. The Fades went down, many sprouting dozens of arrows. "I'll give the order to your knight and hold the breach again," Yurli said eagerly. "No," Lateralda said. "But fighting at the breach will gain us nothing," Lateralda said. "Give the orders for the men to move to different buildings, and have the archers take different positions. Are there warehouses or other large buildings that can hide the horsemen? Move them there, quickly. And then we wait." "They won't be caught again?" "No," Lateralda said. "But they'll be slow and cautious. If we fight them head-on, we lose. If we hold, bide time, we win. That's the only way out of this, Yurli. To survive until help comes. If it's coming." Yurli nodded. "Our next trap won't kill as many," Lateralda said. "But Trollocs are cowards at heart. The knowledge that any roadway could suddenly turn into a death trap will make them hesitate, and will earn us more time than would losing half of our men holding that wall." "All right," Yurli said. He hesitated. "But doesn't this mean that they're anticipating us? This phase of the plan will work only because they expect our ambushes." "I suppose that's true. So shouldn't we do something different? You said that if we've got a hint that the enemy knows what we're going to do, we should change plans." "You're thinking about it too much, son. Go. Do as I commanded." Yes, my lord." He hurried away. This, Lateralda thought, is why I should never teach tactics. It was hard to explain to students that there was a rule that trumped all of the others. Always trust your instincts. The Trollocs would be afraid. He could use that. He'd use anything they gave him. He didn't like to think too long about that rule, lest he dwell on the fact that he'd violated it already, because his every instinct screamed that he should have abandoned this city hours ago.
Chapter 29. A Terrible Feeling. "What is Theron plotting, do you think?" Verlaine asked, as she strolled beside Fail and Alejandra. Fail didn't answer. The late afternoon was softly lit by a distant sun shrouded in clouds. Soon it would make the horizon burn as it sank down for the night. In 2 days, Perrin would go on trial. He'd delayed specifically, she knew, to gain more time for the Ashaman to work out the strange problem with gateways. Their army was growing, still more people flooding to them. Scout reports indicated that the White Cloak force was growing as well, more slowly but still growing. In days like these, an army was a symbol of strength and, at the very least, food. A stand of fingerroot trees glutted themselves on the water of the stream near Perrin's war camp. Such strange plants they were, with those roots that dipped into the water, trunks like flowing glass that had pooled while hardening. There was nothing like them up in Saldaea. It seemed that 2 wrong steps here could lead you into a swamp. No answer for me? Berelaine asked. She seemed distracted these days. I've been thinking. Perhaps it would be good to send an envoy to the White Cloak army. Do you think Perrin would allow me to go and speak with them? Perhaps I could make a personal appeal on his behalf. She kept bringing up that topic. No, Fail said. You know his mind is made up on this trial, Berelaine. The first pursed her lips, but did not press further. The 3 continued their walk, accompanied by 10 maidens. Once, Fail might have complained about the attention. That was before she'd been taken so unexpectedly, and so easily. In the distance, she saw a small group of refugees leaving the camp, walking away to the southeast, cross-country. Before things had gone wrong with the gateways, about 10,000 had been sent to rural areas in Kyrian. All had instructions to remain quiet. Perrin didn't want his location known yet. Women would be still, but of course the men would gossip. They always did. Few knew that gateways failed. Perrin had told the people that he needed the Ashaman strong in case there was fight.
Battery low. Battery 10%.
Refugees had asked to leave, going on foot. To these, Fail gave bits of gold or a jewel from Savannah's store, and she was surprised at how many wanted to return to homes that were in Shanshan-controlled lands. Despite the departures, the size of Perrin's force was swelling day by day. Fail and the others passed a large group, practicing with swords. The refugees who had decided to train were now some 25,000 strong. They practiced late into the day, and Fail could still hear barked orders from Tum. Well, Berelaine continued her musings. What will Perrin do? Why set up this trial? He wants something from those white coats. She stepped around the gnarled finger root. The first, like so many others, read much more into Perrin's actions than there was to find. He'd be amused if he knew the plots they ascribed to him. And she claims to understand men, Fail thought. Perrin was by no means stupid, nor was he the simple man he sometimes claimed to be. He planned, he thought, and he was careful, but he was also direct, deliberate. When he said something, he meant it. I agree with Berelaine, Eliandra said. We should just leave, march away, or attack those white cloaks. Fail shook her head. It bothers Perrin when people think he did something wrong. As long as the white cloaks continue to insist he is a murderer, his name will not be clear. He was being bull-headed and foolish, but there was a nobility about it, so long as it didn't get him killed. However, she loved him for that very sense of honor. Changing him would be ill-advised, and she had to make certain others didn't take advantage of him. As she always did when they discussed the white cloaks, Berelaine got a strange look in her eyes, and she glanced, perhaps unconsciously, in the direction their army camped. Light. She wasn't going to ask again if she could go speak to them. She had come up with a dozen different reasons why she wanted to. Fail noticed a large group of soldiers trying to look inconspicuous as they rounded the inside of the camp, keeping pace with Fail and their guards on their promenade. Perrin wanted her well protected. This young Lord Captain Commander, Eliandra said idly. He looks quite striking in that white uniform, wouldn't you say? If you can get past that sunburst on his cloak. Such a beautiful man. Oh, Berelaine said. Surprisingly, warm color rose in her cheeks. I'd always heard that Morghese's stepson was a handsome man, Eliandra continued. but I hadn't anticipated him being so pristine. Like a statue
I'll
carved
be right
from
back
marble,
in the light.
Farrelane whispered.
The
A
second one.
relic from the age of legends. A perfect thing left behind for us to worship. He's passable, Fail said with a sniff. I prefer a bearded face myself. It wasn't a lie. She loved a bearded face, and Perrin was handsome. He had a burly power to him that was quite appealing. But this Galad Damodred was... Well, it wasn't fair to compare him to Perrin. That would be like comparing a stained glass window to a cabinet made by a master carpenter. Both were excellent examples of their craft, and it was hard to weigh them against one another. But the window certainly did shine. Verlane's expression seemed distant. Yes, she had been taken by Damodred. Such a short time for it to have happened. Fail told Verlaine that finding another man for her attentions would help with the rumors, but the White Cloak commander? Had the woman lost all sense? So what do we do? Alejandra asked as they rounded the south side of the camp, halfway to the point from which they'd started. About the White Cloaks? Fail asked. About Megdin, Alejandra said. Morgaze. I can't help feeling that she took advantage of my kindness, Fail said. After all we went through together, she didn't tell me who she was? You seem to be determined to give her very little credit, Verlaine said. Fail didn't reply. She'd been thinking about what Perrin said, and he was probably right. Fail should not be so angry with her. If Morgaze really had been fleeing one of the Forsaken, it was a miracle that she was still alive. Besides, she herself had lied about who she was when first meeting Perrin. In truth, her anger was because Morgaze was going to judge Perrin. She presumed to judge Perrin. Megdin, the lady's maid, might be grateful, but Morgaze, the queen, would see Perrin as a rival. Would Morgaze really treat this judgment fairly? Or would she take the chance to discredit a man who had raised himself up as a lord? I feel as you do, my lady, Alejandra said softly. And how is that? Deceived, Alejandra said. Megdin was our friend. I thought I knew her. You would have acted exactly as she did in that situation, Verlaine said. Why give away information if you don't have to? Because we were friends, Alejandra said. After what we went through together, it turns out she's Morgaze Trakand. Not just a queen, the queen. The woman's a legend. And she was here with us, serving tea, poorly. You have to admit, Fail said thoughtfully, she did get better with the tea. Fail reached to her throat, touching the cord that bore Roland's stone. She didn't wear it every day, but she did so often enough. Had Morgaze been false that entire time they'd been with the Shido? Or had she, in a way, been more true? With no titles to live up to, she hadn't been forced to be the legendary Morgaze Trakand. Under circumstances like that, wouldn't a person's true nature be more likely to show through? Fail gripped the cord. Morgaze would not turn this trial against Perrin out of spite, but she would offer judgment in honesty, which meant Fail needed to be prepared and have ready. Screams sounded nearby. Fail reacted immediately, spinning toward the woods. She instinctively anticipated Aiel leaping from the bushes to kill and capture, and she felt a moment of sheer panic. But the screams were coming from inside camp. She cursed, turning about, but felt something tug at her belt. She looked down with a start to see her belt knife pull itself from its sheath and flip into the air. A bubble of evil, Verlaine said, stumbling to the side. Fail ducked, throwing herself to the ground as her knife flipped through the air toward her head. It narrowly missed. As Fail came up in a crouch, she saw with a start that Verlaine was facing down a dagger, one that looked from the damage to Berelane's shirt to have ripped its way free of a hidden sheath inside her sleeve. Beyond Berelane, the camp was in a tumult. The nearby practicing refugees were scattering, swords and spears flipping through the air of their own volition. It looked as if every weapon in the camp had suddenly sprung to life, rising up to attack its master. Motion. Fail dodged to the side as her knife came back for her, but a white-haired figure in brown snatched the weapon from the air, holding it in a tight grip. Sulin rolled, clinging to it. Her teeth gritted as she wrenched it from the air and slammed it down onto a stone, breaking the blade from the hilt. It stopped moving. Sulin's spears, however, pulled from their place on her back and spun in the sky, tips pointing toward her. "Run," the maiden said, turning and trying to face all 3 spears at once. "Where?" Fail demanded, picking up a stone from the ground. "The weapons are everywhere." Berelane was struggling with her dagger. She'd grabbed it, but it was fighting her, wrenching her arms from side to side. Alejandra was surrounded by 3 knives. Light. Fail suddenly felt lucky for having worn only one today. Several of the maidens charged in to help Alejandra, throwing stones at the knives, dodging spears that lunged for them. Berelane was alone. Gritting her teeth, feeling half a fool for helping the woman she hated, Fail jumped in and placed her hands over Berelane's, lending her strength to that of the first. Together they wrenched the dagger to the side toward the ground, where they could drive its point into the earth. When they did, remarkably, it stopped moving. Fail released it hesitantly, then looked up at the disheveled Berelane. The woman pressed her right hand to her other palm, stanching the blood from a cut she'd taken. She nodded at Fail. "Thank you." "What stopped it?" Fail asked, heart thumping. Shouts sounded from around the camp, cursing, clangs from weapons. "The dirt?" Berelane asked, kneeling. Fail dug her fingers into the loam. She turned, noticing with alarm that one of the maidens was down, though others had felled several of the flying spears. Fail tossed her handful of soil at one that was still whipping about. When the dirt touched the spear, the weapon dropped. Sulin saw it, eyes widening behind her veiled face. She dropped the stones she'd been wielding and took up a handful of soil, spraying it over her head as the spear drove for her heart. The dirt stopped it, and it fell to the ground. Nearby, the soldiers who had been following along to guard Fail and the others were having a worse time of things. They had backed into a circle, using their shields to block incoming weapons, hunkered down with worried expressions. "Quickly," Fail said to the maidens, digging both hands into the soil. "Spread the word. Let the others know how to stop the weapons." She threw soil at the daggers beside Alejandra, dropping 2 with one throw, then began running for the nearby soldiers. "There is no need for you to apologize, Galad," Morghese said softly. "You couldn't have known what was happening in the Fortress of the Light. You were leagues and leagues away." They sat in his tent, chairs facing each other, late afternoon light shining on the walls. Galad sat with his hands clasped before him as he leaned forward, so thoughtful. She remembered her first impressions of him, long ago, when she'd married his father. The young child had simply been part of the deal, and while Morghese had adopted him, she'd always worried that he felt less loved than his siblings. Galad had always been so solemn, quick to point out when someone did something wrong. But unlike other children, Elaine especially, he had not used his knowledge as a weapon. She should have seen. She should have realized he'd be attracted to the White Cloaks for their vision of a world that was black and white. Could she have prepared him better? Shown him that the world was not black and white? It wasn't even gray. It was full of colors that sometimes didn't fit into any spectrum of morality. He looked up, hands still clasped, eyes troubled. "I accused Valda wrongly. When I went to him, I said I was demanding trial beneath the light because he had abused you and killed you. Half was wrong. I have done something where I was in error, at least in part. Regardless of that fact, I'm pleased that I killed him. Her breath caught in her throat. Valda had reputedly been one of the greatest swordsmen alive, and Galad had bested him in a duel? This youth? But he was a youth no longer. Galad had made his choices, and she had a difficult time judging him for them. In some ways, they seemed more admirable than her own choices. You did well, she said. Valda was a snake. I'm certain he was behind Nial's death. Galad, you did the world a service. He nodded. For what he did to you, he deserved death. But I shall need to release a statement anyway. He rose, clasping his hands behind his back as he walked, his white clothing seeming to glow in the light. I will explain that my accusation of murder was false, but that Valda still deserved death for his other offenses, dire offenses. He stopped for a moment. I wish I had known. There was nothing you could have done, son, she said. My captivity was my own fault for trusting my enemies. Galad waved a hand. There was no resisting Gabriel if what you have heard is true. As for your captivity, you did not trust your enemies. You were betrayed, like all of us, by Valda. The children are never the enemies of a person who walks in the light. And Terran Ebara? She asked. Shadow spawn. No, son. I don't like some of the things he is doing, but I promise you he is a good man. And the trial will prove that, Galad said. Good men can make mistakes. If you proceed with this, it could end in a way that none of us wish. Galad froze, frowning. Mother, are you implying that he should be allowed to escape his crime? Come, she said, gesturing. Sit back down. You're dizzying me with that pacing about. Perhaps he'd risen to the position of Lord Captain Commander only recently, but he already seemed to bristle at taking an order. He did sit, however. Oddly, she felt like a queen again. Galad hadn't seen her during the hard months. He thought of her as the old Morgaze, so around him she actually felt like the old Morgaze. Almost. Niall had held her as a prisoner, but had respected her, and she had begun to think that she might be able to respect him as well. What had happened to the board where she and Niall had played stones so often? She hated to think of it broken in the Shanshan assault. Would Galad become a Lord Captain Commander like Niall? Or perhaps someone better? The queen in her, the queen reawakened, wanted to find a way to bring his light out and stifle the shadow. Galad, she said, what are you going to do? About the trial? No, with this army of yours. We will fight at the last battle. Admirable, she said. But do you know what that means? It means fighting alongside the Dragon Reborn and the Aes Sedai. We can serve alongside the witches for a time, if it is in the name of the greater good. She closed her eyes, breathing out. Galad, listen to yourself. You named them witches? You went to train with them, perhaps to become a warder. Yes. She opened her eyes. He seemed so earnest. But even the most deadly and violent of hounds could be earnest. Do you know what they did to Elaine, Mother? He asked. You mean losing her? Morgaze still harbored anger over that. They sent her out on missions, he said, voice laced with disgust. They refused to let me see her, probably because she was out being put into danger. I met her later outside the tower. Where was she? Morgaze asked, eager. Here in the south. My men named the Aes Sedai witches. Sometimes I wonder how far off from the truth that is. Galad, Not all women who wield the one power are evil inherently, he said. That is a mistaken tradition of the children. The way of the light doesn't make that claim. It just says that the temptation to use the one power can corrupt. I believe that the women who now run the White Tower have let their schemes and selfish plots blind them. She nodded, not wishing to argue the point. Thank the light Elida wasn't here to hear that logic. Either way, he said, we will fight alongside them, and the Dragon Reborn, and this Perene Bara, if need be. The struggle against the shadow outweighs all other concerns. Then let us join that struggle, she said. Galad, forget this trial. Ebara intends to disband some of his army and give the rest to Althor. He met her eyes, then nodded. Yes, I can see now that the pattern has led you to me. We will travel with you after the trial has finished. She sighed. I don't do this by choice, Galad said, rising again. Ebara himself suggested that he be tried. The man's conscience weighs against him, and to deny him this opportunity would be wrong. Let him prove his innocence to us and to himself. Then we can continue. He hesitated, reaching out and touching the white scabbarded sword on his dressing table. And if we continue without him, then he will rest in the light, having paid for his crimes. Galad, she said, you know Lini was among the people you took from Perrin's camp. She should have spoken up, revealed herself to me. I would have set her free, and yet she did not. I have heard you all but threaten to execute the prisoners if Perrin didn't come to battle. Would you have actually done this? Their blood would have been on his head. Lini's blood, Galad? I would have seen her among them and removed her from danger. So you would have killed the others, Morghese said. People who did no wrong, who were innocent of nothing more than being beguiled by Ebara? The executions would never have occurred. It was merely a threat. A lie. Bah! What is the point of this, Mother? To make you think, son, Morghese said. In ways that I should have encouraged before, rather than leaving you to your simple illusions. Life is not so easy as the toss of a coin, one side or the other. Have I ever told you of the trial of Tham Thelmley? Galad shook his head, looking irritated. Listen to me. He was a brick mason in Camelin, a reputable one. He was accused of murdering his brother in the early days of my reign. He had enough repute, and the case was important enough that I judged it myself. He hanged at the end of it. A fitting end for a murderer. Yes, Morghese said. Unfortunately, the murderer went free. One of his workers had actually done the deed. It didn't come out until 2 years later when the man was taken for another murder. He laughed at us then as we hanged him. Thelmley had been innocent all along. The real man, the murderer, was one of those to condemn him during the original trial. Galad fell silent. It's the only time, Morghese said, where I know for certain that I hanged someone by mistake. So you tell me, Galad, should I hang for my mistake in condemning an innocent man? You did your best, Mother, and a man is still dead who did not deserve it. Galad looked troubled. The children like to speak of the light protecting them, Morghese said, of guiding their judgment and leading people to justice. That isn't how it works, Galad. Valda, claiming the blessing of the light, could do terrible things. And I, hoping for the light's aid, have killed unjustly. I'm not saying that Ebara is innocent. I haven't heard enough either way. But I want you to understand. Sometimes a good man can do wrong. At times it is appropriate to punish him. At other times, punishment serves nobody, and the best thing to do is to let him continue and learn, as I continued and learned after making such a poor judgment. Galad frowned. That was good. Finally, he shook his head, his face clearing. We shall see what the trial brings. There was a knock on the posts outside. Galad turned, his frown deepening. Yes? My lord Captain Commander, a white cloak said, lifting the flap and stepping into the tent. He was a lean man with sunken eyes that had dark patches beneath them. We've just had word from the creature Ibarra's camp. They're asking to push back the day of the trial. Galad stood. For what purpose? He demanded. A disturbance in their camp, they claim, the white cloak said. Something about wounded needing tending. My lord Captain Commander, it is obviously a ploy, a trick of some sort. We should attack them, or at the very least, deny this pointless extension. Galad hesitated. He looked at Morgaze. It is no ploy, son, she said. I can promise you that. If Ibarra says he needs more time, he's being honest with you. Bah, Galad said, waving the messenger away. I shall consider it, alongside the things you have said, Mother. Perhaps some extra time to consider would be welcomed.
The channelers say they are working as hard as they can, Gall explained, walking beside Perrin through camp as they checked the various sections. But they say it could take days to see to everyone. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, but it would probably be a long night for many of them, tending the wounded. Thousands have been wounded, though most wounds, fortunately, were not bad. They'd lost some people. Too many. Maybe as many as had fallen to the snake bites. Perrin grunted. Ball himself had his arm in a sling. He'd fended off his spears, only to have one of his arrows nearly kill him. He'd blocked it with his forearm. When Perrin had asked, he'd laughed and said that it had been years since he'd shot himself with his own arrow. Aiel humor. Have we heard back from the White Cloaks? Perrin asked, turning to Aravine, who walked on his other side. Yes, she said, but nothing specific. Their commander said he'd think about giving us more time. Well, he's not the one who will decide, Perrin said, going into the Mayenner section of camp to check on Berelane's people. I'm not going to risk a battle with a quarter of my men wounded and my Ashaman dead tired from healing. We go to this trial when I say so, and if Damodred disagrees, he can just go ahead and attack us. Gall grunted his agreement. He wore his spears, but Perrin noticed they were strapped more tightly in place than usual. Aravine carried a lantern, though they hadn't needed to light it yet. She was anticipating a late night as well. Let me know when Tam and Elias get back, Perrin said to Gall. Perrin had sent each one separately to visit nearby villages and make certain the people there, the ones who hadn't joined a passing army, hadn't suffered from the bubble of evil. Berelane had composed herself, her hand bandaged. She gave the report to him herself, from her tent, saying how many of her soldiers had been wounded, giving the names of the men they'd lost. Only 6 from her camp. Perrin yawned as he left the tent, sending Aravine to check on the Aes Sedai. Gall had run off to help with carrying some of the wounded, and Perrin found himself alone as he walked down the path toward Aleandra's section of camp. His hammer hadn't tried to kill him. So far as he knew, it was the only weapon on anyone's person that hadn't responded to the bubble of evil. What did it mean? He shook his head, then hesitated, pausing in thought as he heard someone jogging along the path toward him. He caught Tam's scent and turned to meet the sturdy man as he arrived. Perrin, son, Tam said, out of breath from running. Something unusual just happened. The bubble of evil hit the village? Perrin asked, alarmed. Were people hurt? Oh, no, Tam said. Not that. The village was fine. They didn't even notice anything was wrong. This is something else. Tam smelled odd, thoughtful, worried.
Perrin frowned. What? What's happening? Well, I have to go, son, Tam said. Leave the camp. I don't know when I'll be back. Is this... It has nothing to do with the White Cloaks, Tam said. I've been told I can't say much, but it's about Rand. The colors swirled. Rand walked the hallways of the Stone of Tyr. His expression was dark, dangerous. Perrin, Tam said, I think this is something I need to do. It involves Aes Sedai, and I have to leave you now. I can't say anything else. They made me swear it. Perrin looked into Tam's eyes and saw the sincerity there. He nodded. All right, then. You need any help? Someone to go with you wherever you're going? I'll be all right, Tam said. He smelled embarrassed. What was going on? I'll try to get you some help, son. He laid a hand on Perrin's shoulder. You've done well here. I'm proud of you. And your father would be too. Keep it up. I'll see you at the last battle, if not before. Perrin nodded. Tam hurried off toward his tent, perhaps to pack.
It was hard to look regal while being carried atop the Camelin city wall in a four-poster bed, but Elaine did her best. Sometimes getting what she wanted was more important than looking regal. Bed rest. For a queen. Well, in order to keep Melfane from hovering over her, she'd given an oath that she would remain in bed. But she'd said nothing about staying in her bedroom. 8 guardsmen carried the massive bed, frame, headboard, and all. Elaine sat in the center wearing a crimson gown, hair carefully brushed, the rose crown of Andor atop her head. The day was muggy, the weather turning warm, the sky still dark with clouds. She spared a moment to feel guilty for making the poor men in dress uniform carry the bed through this early summer heat. But these men would ride to battle in her name. They could stand a little warm weather. How often did guardsmen get the honor of carrying their queen anyway? Birgitta strode alongside the bed, and the bond indicated that she was amused. Elaine had feared she'd try to stop this excursion, but instead she had laughed. Birgitta must have determined that this day's activities, though bound to upset Melfane, were no real risk to Elaine or her babes. To the warder, that meant this was an opportunity to see Elaine get paraded through town looking foolish. Elaine winced. What would the people say? The queen riding a four-poster being marched to the outer wall? Well, Elaine wasn't about to let rumors keep her from seeing the test firsthand, and she wasn't about to be bullied by a tyrannical midwife. She had quite a view from the wall. The fields leading to Arungil lay open to her left. The city bustled to her right. Those fields were too brown. Reports from around the realm were dire. 9 fields in 10 had failed. Elaine's porters carried her up to one of the wall's tower turrets, then hit a snag as they realized the bed was too wide to get into the tower. The demonstration was supposed to happen atop it. She should have considered this. Elaine folded her arms, covers up around her waist, regarding the offending doorway. "You'll have to hoist me up the outside," she declared. Birgitta's amusement rose. The guards looked at her incredulously. "Do it," Elaine said, leaning back against her pillows. A crowd of people was gathering down below. Many were pointing. "I'll never live this down." But she set her jaw. She was not backing away now. It took a good hour, the soldiers setting down her bed and trotting into the tower, fetching ropes and a pulley system used for towing up stones to throw over the wall during sieges. The people gawking in the streets got a good view of Elaine being raised by those pulleys. There was a distance of only about 15 feet from the top of the wall to the top of the turret, riding a red and white bed all the way. She distracted herself by thinking about Kyrian. The noble houses there all claimed to be eagerly awaiting her arrival to take the throne, and yet none offered more than the most flaccid support. Desdemar was fully in effect, and the posturing for Elaine's ascent, or her failure to ascend, had begun the moment Rand had mentioned that he intended the nation to be hers. In Kyrian, 100 different political winds always blew in 100 different directions. She didn't have time to learn all of the different factions before she took the throne. Besides, if she was seen as playing the game, she could be seen as someone to defeat. She had to find a way to seize the Sun Throne without mixing too much in the local house politics. Elaine's bed creaked up and crested the lip of the tower's turret. Atop the tower, Aludra stood with one of her prototype dragons. The bronze tube was quite long and set in a framework of wood. It was just a dummy for display. A second working dragon had been set up atop the next tower down the wall. It was far enough away that Elaine wouldn't be in danger if something went wrong. The slender Tarabonner woman seemed to take no thought for the fact that she was delivering a potentially world-changing weapon to the queen of a foreign country. All Aludra seemed to want was a way to get back at the Shanchan, or so Matt had explained. Elaine had spent some time with the woman while traveling with Luca's menagerie, but still wasn't certain how trustworthy she was. She'd have Master Nori keep an eye on her. Assuming, of course, the dragons worked. Elaine forced herself to be patient as her bed was lowered onto the tower top. She spared another glance for the people down below. Only then did she realize how high up she really was. Light? What if one of the ropes had broken? I'm safe, she reminded herself. Min's viewing. Not that she said anything like that to Birgitta. Not any longer. And she did intend to stop taking so many risks. This wasn't a risk. Not really. She turned away before she grew dizzy and inspected the dragon more closely. It was shaped like a large bronze bell, though longer and narrower, like an enormous vase, turned on its side. Elaine had received more than one missive from the city's irate bell founders. Aludra insisted that her orders be carried out exactly, and had forced the men to recast the tube 3 times. Late the previous night, a loud crack had sounded across the city, as if a stone wall had fallen somewhere, or a bolt of lightning had struck. This morning, Elaine had received a note from Aludra. First test a success, it had read. Meet me today on City Wall for demonstration. Your Majesty, Aludra said. You are, well, yes? I will be fine, Aludra, Elaine said, trying to maintain her dignity. The dragon is ready? It is, Aludra said. She wore a long brown dress, her black wavy hair loose, coming down to her waist. Why no braids today? Aludra didn't seem to care for jewelry, and Elaine had never seen her wear any. A group of 5 men from Matt's band of the Red Hands stood with her, one carrying what appeared to be a chimney brush of some sort. Another had a metal sphere in his hands, and another carried a small wooden cask. Elaine could see a similar group on the next tower over. Someone there raised a hat into the air and waved at her. Matt wanted to watch from the tower with the working dragon, it seemed. Foolhardy man. What if the thing exploded like a night flower? The demonstration, then, Aludra said. We shall begin. These men here will show you what is being done on the other tower. She hesitated as she regarded Elaine in her bed. Her Majesty, I think we should prop her up so that she can see the display. A few minutes later, they'd located some small boxes to place beneath the bed legs and elevate Elaine so that she could see over the tower's crenellations. It appeared that something had been constructed on a distant hillside, though it was too far for Elaine to make out. Aludra pulled out several looking glasses and handed one each to Elaine and Birgitta. Elaine raised her glass to her eye. Dressing dummies. Aludra had set up some 50 of them in ranks on the far hill. Light! Where had she gotten so many? Likely Elaine would be getting some wordy missives from gown makers across the city. Matt had promised this would be worth practically any cost. Of course, that was Matt. He wasn't exactly the most reliable person around. He's not the one who lost an invaluable Turangrial to the shadow, she reminded herself. She grimaced. In her pouch, she carried another replica of the fox head. It was one of 3 she'd created so far. If she was going to be confined to her bed, then she might as well make use of her time. It would be a lot less frustrating if she could channel consistently. All 3 of the replica foxhead medallions worked as the first replica had. She couldn't channel while wearing one, and a powerful weave could overwhelm them. She really needed that original back for further study. You can see, Your Majesty, Aludra said in a stiff voice as if unaccustomed to giving demonstration, that we've tried to recreate the conditions under which you might make use of the dragons, yes? Except instead of 50 dressing dummies, we'll have 100,000 trollocs, Elaine thought. The next tower. You should look at it, Aludra said, gesturing. Elaine turned the glass to look at the next tower down the wall. She could see 5 members of the band there, dressed in uniforms, waiting with another dragon. Matt was looking in the thing, right down the tube. These have trained somewhat on the dragons, Aludra continued, but they do not have the efficiency I would like. They will do for now. Yes? Elaine lowered her glass as the men pulled the dummy tube back, it was on a set of wheels, and rotated it up a bit toward the sky. One poured some black powder in from his cask, then another stuck in a wad of something. This was followed by work by the man with the long pole. That wasn't a chimney brush he held, but some kind of tool used for packing. That looks like the powder inside a night flower, Birgitta said. She felt wary. Aludra shot the warder a glance. And how do you know what is inside a night flower, Marion? You do realize how dangerous it is to open one of those, yes? Birgitta shrugged. Aludra frowned, but got no response, so took a deep breath and calmed herself. The device, it is perfectly safe. We set up the other dragon to do the firing, so there would be no danger, yes? But there would not be danger anyway. The casting is good, and my calculations, they are perfect. Elaine, Birgitta said, I still think we'd be better off watching from the wall down below, even if this one beside us isn't going to be lit.
Hell yeah,
After all I
cheers.
went through to get up here? Elaine asked. No, thank you. Aludra, you may proceed. She ignored Birgitta's annoyance. Did Aludra really think she could hit one of those dressing dummies with her iron sphere? That was a long way to go, and the sphere was so small, barely wider than a man's outstretched palm. Had Elaine invested all of this effort to get something that would work more poorly than a catapult? This dragon sounded as if it could throw its sphere farther, but the boulders tossed by a catapult were many times larger. The men finished. One rolled the sphere into the tube, then they turned the tube to face directly outward. You see, Aludra said, patting the dragon, 3 men is best. 4 for safety in case one falls. One could do the work if he had to, but it would be slow. The men stepped back as Aludra got out a red flag. She held it up in the air, signaling the other team on the next tower down the wall. Elaine focused on them with the glass. One carried a small, smoking length of wood. Matt watched with a curious expression. Aludra lowered her flag. The soldier touched his burning wood to the side of the dragon. The explosive sound that followed was so powerful that it made Elaine jump. The boom was as sharp as a thunderclap. She raised a hand to her breast and remembered to draw breath. A pocket on the mountainside exploded in a massive spray of dust and earth. The ground seemed to tremble. It was as if an Aes Sedai had torn up the earth with a weave, but the one power hadn't been used at all. Aludra seemed disappointed. Elaine raised her looking glass to her eye. The blast had missed the dressing dummies by a good 20 paces, but had ripped a hole in the ground 5 paces wide. Did the ball explode like a night flower to cause that? This device wasn't merely an improved catapult or trebuchet. It was something else. Something capable of smashing an iron sphere into the ground with such force that it blew open a hole, then perhaps exploded on its own. Why, she could line an entire wall with these dragons, with all of them firing together. Aludra raised her flag again. Elaine watched with her glass as the men on the next tower over cleaned, then reloaded the tube. Matt was holding his ears and scowling, which gave Elaine a smile. He really should have watched from her tower. The reloading process took a very short time, perhaps 3 minutes, and Aludra said she intended to see it happen more quickly. Aludra wrote a set of orders and sent it by messenger to the men. They changed the dragon's position slightly. She waved her flag. Elaine steeled herself for another explosion, but still jumped when it came. This time, the blast was dead on, hitting in the very center of the rank of dressing dummies. Their tattered remnants spun through the air. The blow destroyed 5 or 6 and knocked down a good dozen of them. With the ability to fire every 2 minutes, hit so far away, and deal such destruction, these weapons would be deadly. As deadly as Damani, perhaps. Birgitta was still looking through her looking glass, and while her face was impassive, Elaine could feel the woman's amazement. The weapon, you find it pleasing? Aludra asked. I find it pleasing, Aludra, Elaine said, smiling. I find it pleasing indeed. The resources of the entire city are yours. The resources of all Andor. There are several more Bell founders in Andor. She glanced at the illuminator. But you must keep the plans and designs a secret. I will send guards with you. We can't afford to let any of the Bell founders consider the value of leaving home and selling information to our enemies. So long as they don't reach the Shan-Chan, Aludra said. I care not. Well, I do, Elaine said. And I'm the one who will see these things used properly. I'll need an oath out of you, Aludra. The woman sighed, but gave it. Elaine had no intention of turning them against anyone other than Trollocs and Shan-Chan, but she would feel much more secure about her nation knowing that she had these at her disposal. She smiled as she considered it, and found it difficult to contain her excitement. Birgitta finally lowered her glass. She felt solemn. What? Elaine asked, as the guards took turns with her glass inspecting the devastation. She felt some odd indigestion. Had she eaten something bad for lunch? The world just changed, Elaine, Birgitta said, shaking her head, long braids swinging slightly. It just changed in a very large way. I have a terrible feeling that it's only the beginning. Chapter 30. Men dream here. These white cloaks are a tight-lipped group, my lady, Lucille said with a smug smile. But they're still men. Men who haven't seen a woman in a while, I think. That always makes them lose what few brains they have. Fail walked the horse lines. The
All right. Call it early a little bit. I gotta clothes to fold up and put away. So I'm gonna call it end of this stream for tonight. But I want to Thank everyone for coming by and everyone who keeps stopping by. I appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe.